I'm an old man. I think, I'm closer to the end of the beginning, but my fear is for younger people finding that their stress, their suicides are up among young people. And it just seems like these people that lead us, like even Bill Gates, he wants to kill people through depopulation, pays for abortions all over the world. And now that things are getting close to maybe some terrible, terrible start to a war, he wants to, and we know there's going to be disease happening, as Jesus said, will come in the seals judgment. But they'll have the WHO there to lock everybody down and make sure they do what they're told to do, or they'll limit their movements, they'll limit their ability to live. For some of the theories I hear being circulated are mass suicides by the elderly. If they get us out of the way,
watch out.
Then it opens the door. And why I say that is, like a lot of the next generation, they were never taught to critically think. Generation X and those behind it. I'm not saying every one of them, but there's so many that if they don't like what you say, they go directly to feelings, even if they're wrong, and they double down on feelings because they're so intense and they can't argue facts, can't argue this. And so since they run on their feelings, when you have all this fear and all this anxiety, it just gives you no hope. You have no real hope. And as Christians, we have real hope. And we know this is not the end.
Yeah, it's a whole society of nihilism, especially the younger society.
Yes.
They've rejected all religious ideas, and I'm talking about religion, and I'm talking about in terms of God, in terms of Scripture, in terms of the morality of Scripture and what God commands. They rejected that, so they're incredibly skeptic. They're incredibly cynical of anything to do with God or anything to do with Christ. And therefore, they become more and more depressed because man doesn't live in a vacuum. It'll has to go towards something, and the things that they're going toward is destructive. And so a whole generation, call it Generation Z, I think that's the latest one that we can think of. I think there's a Generation Alpha that comes after that. But in speaking of millennials and Generation Z, they really are godless. And I mean godless in the sense of like they don't have any concept, ideas, or desire of any sort, unlike previous generations, to know God, to talk about God, and to see these things looming in the horizon. And obviously, some people have tuned out, dropped out. They don't care. They just live in their lives. But here is the President of the United States who is gibbering nonsense in Poland, while nukes are about to go off in Russia, at least the threat of it. And 19%, I'll give you this poll, 19% of Americans, just under 20, believe and have confidence that the president will be able to handle this conflict. I can't imagine if it was that low when Nixon was in Vietnam or when Johnson was president was that low, but it's got to be one of the lowest in terms of president going into a war and funding the war infinitum, meaning that we just keep writing checks. David, what do you think? I mean, it's American people lost confidence in this, almost a nihilistic society, meaning who cares? Let's just move on with life.
Yeah, because they don't see, if you look around, because people that don't live by faith, look around at the society. We see drugs, we see crime, we see everything collapsing. I mean, Jacob did a sermon 10 or 15 years ago, all that can be shaken. And everything he said is being shaken. All the foundations of which America has that has made it good and strong are being shaken and torn about. The education system is collapsing. The crime, the ability of police to hold back crime, the lack of self-control by people, the lack of common sense. Everything that is anything is now being shaken. And so young people don't have a faith in God, so they don't have a faith in anything. So why not eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die?
That's very true. Jay, do you think that's among younger people, and we're on the same age, but you've been teaching and ministry out there sharing. Do you see that nihilism? You see that people are just tuned out. I mean, we're looming into a major war that no generation. In fact, I don't know how many Americans are still. Is there any Americans alive from World War II? I don't know if there's any. How many are left? I would have to check on that if there's any military guys that fought in World War II. But we haven't had to deal with this in such a long time. And now it's looming over. But as David said, other things have become so evil that people have become, they gave up. And so I ask you a couple of things. Have you seen it? And then the second question is, what do we do to reach that generation?
I have seen the nihilism. It doesn't take much to see it. When you have a platform like Twitch, where literally you pay people to watch them play video games, and those video games are ultra violent. I mean, that's the de-evolution of the mind of our society. The biggest problem I'm seeing is there is a huge gap in biblical literacy amongst not only the church, but amongst society in general. Unless you read the book of Ruth and understand that Ruth is a young person that values Naomi, who is an older person.
Yes.
You get people like that professor in Harvard that says that Japan needs to commit genocide on all the older people.
See that? Yeah.
Okay.
Crazy.
This is the craziness of not having any biblical literacy. You can't have a generation that venerates the wisdom of the previous unless they have a guide how to do that and why to do that.
Yeah.
And according to them, the oracle in their hand that answers all their questions about life is greater than any wisdom that an old person can give them. That's the terrible truth.
It is. How do we reach them?
Their brokenness and their emotions are not being fulfilled by their oracles, by their games, by their interactions. Yeah. Dealing with them on a one-on-one basis. I've talked to a young man who's just about to go into college last week, and being interested and engaged in his life and some of the trials and tribulations of those teenage years, and being interested and then recalling yours. That's the best thing of putting our foot forward to reaching that generation, making them understand that we've been there and we have insight that we can share. And not only that, we're willing to listen. Yeah.
Yeah, that's an important thing. And ultimately, as Christians, our main, the Great Commission is still the Great Commission. It's still commanded by our Lord in difficult times or in hard times or in good times. It's still the same. And we're not done until the trumpet sounds, until the Lord comes.